I'm really curious to get your take on the CBS settlement that was announced just within the last 24 hours. And before we get into the details of the settlement, let's reflect on the actual issue at hand, which was the editing of the Kamala Harris clip from Face the Nation versus what was played on 60 Minutes. We can go ahead here and roll S1.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
Well, Bill, the work that we have done has resulted in a number of movements in that region by Israel that were very much prompted by or a result of many things, including our advocacy for what needs to happen in the region.
But it seems that Prime Minister Netanyahu is not listening.
We're not going to stop pursuing what is necessary for the United States to be clear about where we stand on the need for this war to end.
So, Mark, it's actually just that clip itself, a reminder of why Kamala Harris was such a disastrous politician, period. I shouldn't say was. She's still a politician, of course. But CBS ended up getting a lawsuit. And I'm curious what you think about this, because the lawsuit, I was just reading through it today. It's kind of a ridiculous lawsuit. It refers to her as Kamala throughout the lawsuit. There's no question that what CBS did was A, standard practice, and B, deceptive in the media. And you know this because you were inside the big network media world for a long time. So CBS settles. They have a merger in process. Paramount has a merger in process with Skydance, which is owned by Larry Ellison's son or operated by Larry Ellison's son. Quite interesting. That'll be before the Trump administration. So give us your take. Why does CBS settle for $16 million, the same amount that ABC settled for in the George Stephanopoulos case, which was much more serious?
Because they're craven, gutless, and part of establishment media that has no legs to stand on because of their professional failure. Ironically, this was not a professional failure. This is business as usual. CBS is correct when they say this is what happens. People might find it unfortunate, but the New York Times does it. The Free Beacon does it. You do an interview and you run parts of the interview that aren't necessarily lined up with the exact question. I can understand why civilians, regular non-pros would find that offensive. But it's what happens. It's how news magazine pieces get edited. Ironically, CBS, like the New York Times and everybody else, were part of the Hunter Biden cover-up, were part of the Joe Biden cover-up, so they have no leg to stand on. It'd be like a bunch of doctors killing a bunch of their patients through professional negligence. And then people say, well, you know, doctor, can you help me with something? And the doctor's like, well, I can't help you because I'm professionally negligent, but I won't admit it. So I'm just gonna give you money to make it go away. It's just there's so much irony. It's so horrible. If every news magazine producer who selectively and misleadingly edited an interview had to pay $15 million to the Donald Trump Presidential Library, it would look like the Taj Mahal or the Kremlin, because they all do it. But again, the irony is they should be paying a lot of money and they should be admitting error for a lot of things they've done, but not for this. Right. But they have no leg to stand on. And of course, Paramount and the leadership there wanted to make this go away. So they were willing to pay any price, not bear any burden, but pay any price to make it go away.
Right. They want their merger to go through, and they want to have a good working relationship with the Trump administration. And it occurs to me, having this conversation, Mark, actually, that you might be able to offer the audience some insight into how unfortunate the level of editorial control that is in the hands of so few people at a major corporation, like, for example, Paramount, CBS, is, because you have people who are looking at the cuts of those interviews that are going to go on a major show like Face the Nation or 60 Minutes, that actually, if they want to, can exercise pretty like granular level control over what goes out. You know this better than I do. So maybe you could just offer us like actually some insight into how that sausage gets made when a big interview like that hits the airwaves.
Well, first of all, they're crashing. And what you saw was the clip that was done by one show, not by 60 Minutes. You know, the way it works is 60 Minutes does the interview. They've got the raw tapes. They've got the full interview. And another show or the promo department needs to slap something together really quickly. And they don't care about the editorial integrity of does answer A match up with question A match up with answer B. So in this case, I can say without fear of contradiction that the reason they did what they did was not, as the lawsuit charges, to help Kamala Harris. They did it because that's the way they make the sausage. They want the thing to be linear. They want it to be compact and good storytelling. Now, again, I'll say CBS News, like everybody else in the liberal media, does lots of things to hurt Donald Trump and help Kamala Harris during this campaign. This was not one of them. But they're so weak because they're so unable to defend their normal shoddy practices that do represent bias, that they had to pay the money because, and this is the dirtiest little secret of all, they didn't want to go through discovery. Because if the Trump lawyers got a hold of all the communications done by CBS and 60 Minutes during this process, then there'd be trouble. Then there'd be trouble for CBS.
That was the same thing in my understanding, is that was very likely the same thing in the ABC case with George Stephanopoulos, which I think was much more of a significant challenge legally than this one was. I mean, he actually got a materially incorrect, he broadcast a materially incorrect statement about the president. And I think they were probably terrified of discovery too, Mark.
100%. Can you imagine the texts and emails that George Stephanopoulos have sent in the context of that period to his friends Paul Begala and James Carville, who he's been communicating with for 40 years since they worked together in the Clinton campaign? Like, that would be hideous. So yeah, that's part of the settlement. Part of the settlement was they want the merger to go through. Part of the settlement is they don't want discovery, I'm sure. And part of it is, again, as deluded and in denial as they are about their actual transgressions, they know that they don't have a leg to stand on because they have been biased in so many other cases. I'll say again, ironically, this was not one of them.
This is such a good point. Let's put this Dave Iskoff, this is F5 post up on the screen. He picked up on this line in the New York Times story on the settlement that said Paramount's board was concerned that paying a higher amount to settle the case could increase the company's exposure to potential legal actions from shareholders accusing them of bribery. Mark, this is delicious. I'm sorry. I mean, it is such a, we have to be able to laugh at it because it's a very funny statement on how pathetic the media has become in this country. But yes, they have a pending merger in front of the Trump administration. Mark Zuckerberg recently started pouring a bunch of money into the Trump inaugural coffers after he beat Kamala Harris. He has a merger, or he's an FTC complaint ahead of the Trump administration. They're still going pedal to the metal on that FTC case. Andrew Ferguson in the Trump administration hasn't dropped it at all. And interestingly enough, something similar might happen with the Skydance merger. Their money might not even end up mattering.
Yeah. Look, I think one of the dogs that's not barking that's so interesting to me, and you see it in Silicon Valley too, you see it at the Washington Post, you see it at Harvard. There are some people protesting. A couple people did quit CBS, including the head of the news division and the head of 60 Minutes. But you're not seeing what I think you would have seen a year ago in something comparable. You're not seeing mass resignations. You're not seeing people quitting Facebook in mass numbers to protest. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's a sign that these leaders, I say leaders in air quotes, hopefully you could hear it in my voice because I don't want to move my hands. It's a sign that people like Mark Zuckerberg and Jeff Bezos and the people who run Paramount, they recognize that they are on the wrong side of current history with Donald Trump and MAGA and anti-woke. And something's going on with the employees at Facebook and the students at Harvard and the reporters at the Washington Post. Either finally they're being stood up to in effect, and like most bullies, they're backing down when someone stands up to them, or they see the handwriting on the wall and recognize that they're on the wrong side of history on so many of these issues.
Right. And the business model, and again, this is a place where you'll have more insight than I do, but the business model is so quickly becoming outmoded in that with the breakup of monoculture into, this everyone's sort of clustered in a niche. And when monoculture goes away, you can't have the overhead that you have at CNN. You can't pay, for example, Anderson Cooper what you pay Anderson Cooper if the ratings are going to be that low because you're just appealing to a tiny slice of the public. And I think some of them, there's some reporting about this and Jeff Bezos at the Washington Post, they want to broaden the audience again because there's more ad revenue in it. And yet, I don't know, Mark, if this allows them to really rebuild trust with the people that they I don't know that they can repair that trust at this point, I guess is what I'm trying to say, when there's so much competition.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, I'd say it's from monoculture to Emily culture, right? That's the transition we're in now. Michael Jordan, the NBA player, he was a Democrat, but he didn't endorse Democratic politicians. And they asked him, why not? And he'd say, because Republicans buy sneakers too. Right. I've never understood these organizations whose premise is we're gonna reject trying to appeal to 50% of our potential consumers. One thing that Two-Way, where I work, tries to do is we say, we want everybody. We don't just want moderate, centrists, and independents, although that's a pretty big group. We want everybody. We want far left, far right. We want everybody in between. And I think that these organizations that have been masquerading as nonpartisan and fair, which have alienated half the country, really have a problem now because they're not going to go as far left as MSNBC. And so there's nothing in it for that group that just wants to hear liberal dogma, that doesn't want to watch these places. And they're not appealing to half the country. So they've created a business model that's ideologically untenable. And as you said, the cost structure is completely out of whack with the audience they can reach. So they've got to figure out what they want to be when they grow up. And they're old men and women, so they've got to have to go to like a Benjamin Button situation. They need to reverse, get younger, figure out what they want to be, grow up, and then execute something that's actually, a sensible business model to make money.